Belle, he said. It's time to go. Already? It's been 5 hours. We've been lying on the grass staring at each other for 5 hours. Please? I really need to get home. I nodded sleepily. Do you think you could carry me back to the car with your super strength? Not everyone can speed through a dense forest at over 100 mph, you know. Over 100 mph? Geez, he muttered, but took a deep breath. Okay, Belle. Over 100 mph, here we go. He pulled out a sleeping bag from his camping pack. Close your eyes and put your arms around my neck. I did as he asked. At first, I felt us lowering to the ground, speedily. Then, a comforting feeling of soft down beneath my shins. Edward made a few scooching movements and we were off, speeding down the hill. When I felt safe enough to open my eyes, my truck was in front of us. Edward was standing up, brushing himself off. The sun had set, but I thought I noticed a faint glimmer of scorching crimson haunting his skin. Drive me to my car, please, he said. I need to be in bed by 8. I started the car. The engine hummed gently, harmonizing with Edward's sudden onslaught of snores. I gazed at the sweet vampire drool dribbling down his cheek from his open mouth. It suddenly occurred to me that, after all that frolicking in the meadows, he hadn't kissed me. Was it because of the mold that grew in my sinuses? Or the fact that the only way to treat the mold was to pour burning fat in my nose, massacring their colonies? Or was he disgusted that, deep in my heart, I considered the mold a part of me? No. He couldn't possibly know about that. The sinus mold was one secret I would carry with me to the grave. The grave. It was inescapable. One day, I would die in a beautiful explosion, but Edward would live on. Maybe that's why he hadn't kissed me. Maybe he couldn't afford to get attached to a person tragically bound to become a million glittering particles. I looked at his tiny body curled up in the passenger seat. In a year, I would be 18, but Edward would still be 17. He would still have the youthful frame of a 12-year-old, but I would have saggy, postpartum flesh and rheumatism. I couldn't blame him for not wanting to kiss me. Who would want to kiss a pair of lips that, at any moment, could turn into a wrinkled old pile of dust? Unless I, too, became a vampire. Nothing would keep Edward's lips from mine if we were both immortal. All Edward had to do was bite, and he would never again have to worry about the beautiful memories I would lose to Alzheimer's in college. About 3 things I was absolutely certain. First, Edward was most likely my soulmate, maybe. Second, there was a vampire part of him, which I assumed was wildly out of his control, that wanted me dead. And third, I unconditionally, irrevocably, impenetrably, heterogeneously, gynecologically, wished that he had kissed me. 7. The Mullins. The eggshell-colored dawn woke me with its gentleness. My right leg was in my left armpit. Stuffed Dracula was tucked under my arm comfortingly. Ah, the beginning of another chapter. I groggily sat up and involuntarily let out a blood-curdling scream. There was a vampire in my room. And he was screaming, too. What's that on your face? Edward shrieked. What? What? I put my fingers to my cheek and felt something sticky. Oh, that's just my night moisturizing mask. The mask made me look like a warrior, bravely fighting facial dryness. I could see from Edward's expression that he was trying to understand. So I wouldn't be embarrassed, he bent down and took some mud from the bottom of his sneaker and smeared it on his face. He smiled at me. So sweet, I thought. He held furiously, gnashing his teeth in anger as he wiped the mud out of his eyes. So romantic, I thought. How did you get in here? I asked when he was done flailing. I told your dad we had to work on a science project, he said. Now? In the morning? It's 1 p.m., Belle. I remembered that last night I had slept with my head on the floor and my legs on the bed to prepare for my inevitable life as a bat. At about 5 a.m. I gave up and slept in a position more fitting to my second career option, vampire yoga instructor. I looked at him suspiciously, through my magnifying glass. Have you been coming here in secret, night after night, to watch me sleep? No. No. Of course not. That would be so weird. I've only been here a few minutes. Then he added quietly, you look pretty when you sleep. I blushed. My moisturizing mask came with beauty mark stickers, which I had arranged artfully on my face. Thanks. Did I do or say anything? I asked. I was a known sleep biter, which was a problem at summer camp, and probably why I liked Edward. I was also a known sleep talker. I hoped I hadn't revealed anything embarrassing, like the fact that sometimes I fall down. You said my name, he said with a little smile. Really? Yeah. Well, it was either that or Edwin, but why would you say Edwin? He laughed. Suddenly last night's dream came to me. It was about the one person I'd like to have dinner with, living or dead, U.S. Secretary of War under Lincoln, Edwin Stanton. Yeah, weird. I said guiltily as I got out of bed and went over to the mirror above my desk. My hair looked like a tangled, puffy mess. I decided to leave it. Very retro 80s chic. So, what are we going to do today, Edward? After the science project, you mean? But I thought you made that up so that you could bypass my dad's background check into whether you were good enough to date me? Oh, he still checked me, Edward said with a shiver. First, he washed me vertically with one side of his wiper. Then he dried me horizontally with the other side of his wiper. He shrugged. I'd do the same for my daughter. Anyway, you're right, there is no science project, he continued. But have you ever made your own volcano? You build a mound of dirt with a hole in it and then you mix red food coloring, vinegar and baking soda and pour it in the hole and it actually explodes. It's so awesome. We made 2 volcanoes so they could race each other. Edward kept screaming, oh my god, so cool, even as we were gathering dirt. After we were finished cleaning up the kitchen, Edward sat in Jim's chair. It was weird to see him sitting where Jim had been sitting just a few hours earlier, and where, centuries earlier, Native American werewolves would have lived. So my mom really wants to meet you, Edward said. We refer to you as Bellarific. My mom and I have tons of inside jokes like that. I'd love to. But, will she like me? I asked, just for show, because parents always like me. Of course, he said. She just wants me to be happy. She wouldn't care if you were in a coma, or even severely deformed. I thought of my tendency to sleep a lot and my right leg, which is slightly longer than my left. So, Edward had noticed my inadequacies. Yes, well, take my right leg or leave it, I said peevishly. Many boys at school like me. He looked down at the ground, down towards my freak leg. I could tell, by the way he was silent and rubbed his head, that he accepted me and my leg just the way it was. Do you want to go over now? He asked after a few minutes of silent contemplation, probably about how lucky he was to be dating a normal human. I figured that if what Edward said about his parents was true, they wouldn't care if I was still wearing my onesie pajamas. Edward liked to drive my U-Haul. I think this was because there was plenty of room for the large rolling backpack he carried around with him everywhere. We drove down to the end of my street, past Last Chance Batteries, past No Return Videos, and past This Is Absolutely the End books. Edward got on the highway and drove by several exits. I started getting impatient. I was finally about to ask him if he liked me or for my paper cuts when Edward turned the truck around. This is such a fun car, he exclaimed, honking at the drivers near us. Suddenly, a large Safeway truck came up in the next lane. It blew its horn in response. Uh-oh, Edward said. He's too big for us. Edward put his foot down on the gas and we zoomed back towards Switchblade. That was dangerous, right? Edward asked me nervously. I'm dangerous, right? Of course, Edward, I said, thinking less about his driving and more about his teeth ripping through my skin. A few minutes later, we pulled into the driveway of a house a couple blocks from mine, but on the wealthy vampire side of town. Well, we're here, Edward said, getting out and slapping the side of the U-Haul. You and me, he said, pressing his face to the truck at the level of the lumberjack's ankle. We'll beat 'em every time. As soon as we were inside, Edward's family rushed to greet me. What seemed like 30 people circled me, chattering away. Oh my God, you smell good. Good smell, good smell. She really does smell good. Do you mind if I put my nose right on you? Right on your arm? More smelly please. If I could destroy every part of my brain except the part that smelled your smell, I would do it. I would do it in a second. Let's go, Belle, Edward whispered and grabbed my hand. We pushed through the ravenous vampires and out the front door. So that went well, I said outside in the U-Haul. I sniffed my hair. I did smell good. No, that wasn't my house, Edward said, starting the truck. I don't even know those people. Sometimes I get addresses confused. We drove to a bigger mansion. As we walked up to its porch, I noticed that the house wasn't cleverly camouflaged with the woods behind it, like I first thought. It was made entirely of glass. I looked around in shock. The walkway was glass, the mailbox was glass, and the welcome mat was glass. I decided not to wipe my feet. Our house is clear. We don't keep any secrets, Edward explained. Anyone can look in at any time and see what we're doing. I imagined Edward's family sitting in the living room, drinking blood cocktails. Do your neighbors say anything? I asked. Well, they keep their blinds down. They say it's indecent, but my dad is such a good plastic surgeon that no one really cares. Edward's dad, Dr. Claudius Mullen, opened the door when we rang. Claudius was well respected in Switchblade for his Angelina Jolie lips. People say he operated on himself for hours. I had to admit, the result was stunning. Eva Mullen, Edward's mom, came running up behind him. Edward, my darling, she cried. Mom, meet Belle. Oh, you're lovely. Much lovelier than I thought. Edward's so weird, you know. Trust me. I thought. I know. You look like a 1920s movie star. I blurted. Early horror films were my favorite. Thank you, Belle, Dr. Mullen said. It's my work. The eyes, of course, are hers. The heart is a transplant. So that's why vampires are so beautiful. And cruel. Pleased to meet you, I said, imagining how good they'd all look in our wedding photos. For a minute I felt worried thinking of the joint family pictures, but then I thought, it won't be a problem, I'll ask Jim to be the photographer. And that's not all the work I've done on this family, Dr. Mullen continued. You see Edward's handsome forehead? Dad. Edward whined. The Mullens were silent. I suddenly felt awkward, like I didn't know what to do with my thumbs. So I took out my phone and texted "Sup" to Lucy. I wondered if she had my number, or if the random set of digits I guessed was her number. When I looked up, Eva and Claudius were also texting. I glanced around the room for something to compliment when it came time to communicate by speaking again. I was just about to remark on an exquisite electrical outlet in the corner, when I noticed the grand piano. Nice piano, I said, imagining how good it would look in wedding photos, provided that Jim wasn't lurking in the background. Do you play? Oh no, Eva Mullen said, but Edward does. A little, Edward said, sheepishly. Go ahead, play. Eva said. She picked up the triangle that was lying on the piano and handed it to Edward. He started banging on it. It sounded like construction work very early in the morning. Whoops. I messed up. Let me start over, he said. He started banging again. Wait. I haven't practiced in a while. Let me start over. Edward continued to bang the triangle. Eva closed her eyes and raised her arms, swaying rhythmically to Edward's music. Edward held the triangle up high, in what appeared to be a grand finish, but then he brought it down hard, hitting the top of the piano. He continued to bang the piano, putting the entire force of his slim body into each smash. The piano shook. The room vibrated. When he was finished, I subtly removed my hands from my ears. I wrote that for you, Edward murmured, drawing me close. It's called Belle's Lullaby. I'll listen to it every night, I said. With the sound turned all the way down, it would be lovely. This was the third lullaby that had been written for me, counting the one by Carter Burwell. After dinner, Edward took me upstairs to see his room. At the top of the stairs was a giant wooden cross. Ironic, huh? Edward said. Why? I asked with trepidation, imagining that, at any second, Edward would turn into dust, which I would then sweep up and disperse over my furniture so he would always be with me. Because we're Jewish, of course, non-practicing. 3 of the 4 walls, the 4th was glass, in Edward's room were covered with CDs, rows and rows of CDs, and I didn't recognize a single one. Oh! I exclaimed, thinking I saw one I knew. No, not it. I kept walking. Oh, here's, no. I turned to the next wall. Wait. No. I figured I should read a couple labels, instead of only look at side album art. That's when I realized they were all recordings of Edward's music, triangle, and some recorder. Eva sings on my CDs, he said with a smile. Wanna hear? Come on, we can dance. No. I shouted. I will not dance. Edward looked frightened. Probably because the last time I danced, I caused a fire in the cafeteria. Soon the whole city had erupted into riots. Few could handle the radical illusion of my moonwalking feet. Half believed I was a witch. Not yet, at least, I added. Soon my time would come. The revolution could wait. Okay, well, let's go into my dad's study. I'll tell you the story of how he became a plastic surgeon. It involves hideously deformed creatures. Edward showed me the before and after photos of Dr. Mullen's patients. I assumed the before pictures were taken before he had bitten them, and the after pictures were vampire pictures. The vampires had such straight noses, nice breasts, and expressionless faces. And they were all rich. So, how do you make an appointment with Dr. Mullen? Why? You're beautiful, Belle. Yes, I said quickly. It was just like Edward to not want me to go through the pain of tooth transformation. It was absurd. When my wisdom teeth grew in, it didn't hurt at all. No, he said sternly. You shouldn't see him. From Edward's serious expression, I could tell what he was contemplating. Should he do it himself and, more specifically, should he be chewing gum when he bit me in case he had bad breath? He was probably wondering if he should spit the gum out first or keep it in his mouth, but kind of under his tongue so I wouldn't notice. He was probably wondering if spearmint and blood tasted okay together. Enough. I said to interrupt his hypothetical thoughts. Let's just go back to my house, okay? Maybe it would be easier for him to bite me in a different setting. The kitchen, perhaps. With the aromatic scent of squirrel meat sizzling in the microwave and the hunger-inducing soundtrack of scraping cutlery. Yeah, okay. Can I drop you off a little far away though? I'd rather not see your dad again. I haven't thought of any new conversation topics since last time. It won't come off as natural unless I videotape myself saying them first. I froze. Jim. I had forgotten about that complication. My dad would never let Edward bite me unless he planned to share my blood with Claudius and Eva. Jim lived by a categorical set of ethics. Edward would have to bite me before I got home. How about we walk back? Through the cemetery? One thing my mom had taught me is that it's difficult to refuse requests made in italics. That's how she'd persuade me to buy rainbow-colored cereal, week after week. Okay, he said. Wait, before we go. Just bite this. For practice. I outstretched my pallid white arms to him, my hands together, gently cupping a bright red apple that I had swiped from the fake kitchen downstairs. Edward's hand was steady as he took the tempting fruit. As his mouth opened, I saw his iridescent teeth sparkle. He slowly brought the fruit to his parted lips, beads of saliva forming at the corners of his mouth. He closed his eyes. I opened my heart. Hey, he exclaimed, looking at the still intact fruit and then at my still unpunctured head that rested atop my still unpunctured neck. It's plastic. I guffawed, snatching it back. I was nearly crying at the hilarious joke crafted by my superior sense of humor. Edward placed the apple back in a basket of fake fruit, next to a vase of fake flowers, next to the plate of likely fake bread. I looked at him lovingly while I attached a small target to my neck. Would he bite when it mattered? I wondered. Could he bite a moving target? What about a moving target 50 yards away with a wind speed of 485 mph? We left the house and started walking towards the cemetery. If the desires of my heart and the predictions of my pedometer were correct, I was only 952 steps away from becoming a bloodsucker. 8. The cemetery. We walked together, our pointer fingers romantically linked. The cemetery loomed ahead of us, covered in a dark haze of night, lit only by a sliver of moon. Twilight. I mean, nightlight. I could feel the excitement bubbling up inside of me. Yes, my romantic conquest was finally coming to fruition. I would prove to Edward that I was eligible to become a vampire by bringing him to a place that sort of tangentially has to do with vampires. It was a flawless plan. Boy, would Mom and Dad be surprised. And the people in Phoenix. By the end of the night, not only would I be a vampire, but I would finally have my upper ear pierced. Before Edward bit me, I was going to ask him to squeeze my hand tightly and stick a thong through the cartilage of my left ear. I hoped he had brought a hypoallergenic stud earring with him. I wondered what people at school would think when they saw the new me. They would think, vampire. Stake her. But as we neared the gate, Edward began to grow uneasy, my first clue that something was terribly wrong. Our pace had slowed to a crawl, and as I looked at him I began to realize that even his walk had become abnormal. He was lurching awkwardly and holding his stomach with an odd expression on his face, the expression of a bat, lurching through a cemetery on its haunches. To be honest, that's what most of Edward's expressions reminded me of. What's wrong, Edward? I asked. Do we have to go through the cemetery? It's my meds. I've been off them for 2 days now, and anything that causes fear makes me nauseated. Actually, anything that causes emotion makes me nauseated. Why would fear be a problem? I wondered. We were going to a cemetery, the Chuck E. Cheeses of vampires. But I knew I had to play the caring girlfriend. Let's find a place where you can lie down, I said maternally, but also seductively. I took his hand and pulled him through the gate, but he grabbed one of the gate's bars and clung stubbornly. I pried his fingers off, one by one, as he whimpered. Finally, using all my weight, I was able to push him through the gate. We had entered the cemetery, or, as I assumed vampires call it, the cemetery. I later found out that, in fact, they call it a cemetery. As Edward talked about something, whoever knew what he was talking about? Whoever listened? He was adorable, though. I swung our clasped hands a little, placing my other hand over his mouth affectionately. I imaged what I would be like after the transformation took place. I could probably wear leggings as pants every day, and no one would say anything because they would be afraid I'd bite them. What would my special name be? Probably Alice, because that is a vampire-sounding name. What would my special power be? Probably the power to drink blood without a chaser. The mood was perfect. Veiled in dim light, the cemetery seemed to cry out, "Suck your girlfriend's blood." She's ready. She's targeted. You don't need to exert any energy, all you need to do is open your mouth and she can run into your tooth if you're tired. As soon as I realized that I was screaming this in Edward's ear, I stopped and politely apologized, stepping away to give him personal space. After one last nervous glance at the gravestones, he pulled me close. "Don't leave my side," he quavered, hanging onto my arm and burying his head below my shoulder. It felt natural. I surveyed my surroundings and mentally formulated a description of them. Grave after grave poked up from the grass. It was like a formation of grave soldiers, lined up in a grave phalanx of grave-like proportions. A grave site indeed. I think there were also some trees and stuff. As we walked along the winding paths, I had a thought. It was a little thought, spoken by a little internal voice, like the one that asks if you are afraid of it and you say no, and it says if you ever try to get rid of me you will live to regret it. My though was this: what if I became an incredibly bloodthirsty vampire? What if that was the sole reason Edward hadn't bitten me, thereby destroying my soul? What if when his mom had offered me peach cobbler, I shouldn't have eaten piece after piece until there was none left while his family watched with hungry eyes? Maybe I shouldn't have eaten all the hot dogs, either. But I wasn't about to rudely let all that human food go to waste. I still don't know why, after making a plate of food for me, Eva served the members of her vampire family as well. That was awfully presumptive. What if I didn't feel like walking around the table, piling their food onto my plate? "Edward," I said, deciding it was time to be direct. "If I were a vampire, I would have no trouble resisting people's blood, even Lucy's. I know I told you that if I ever became a vampire, the first thing I would do is invite Lucy to an action movie in a dark, deserted theater, but I was joking. In all seriousness, the first thing I would do is bite a beautiful rhododendron and win a Nobel Prize for engineering immortal flora that could survive even in deserts." "Belle," he said, taking both my hands. "If we don't sit down, I will barf something up. I'm not sure what, because I did not eat anything other than orange soda today, but it could be anything from my kidney to my other kidney." "Okay." After 20 more minutes of moonlit stroll, we settled down on the most comfortable-looking grave I could find, which happened to be covered in plush leather. James C. Leather King Murphy, 1906 to 1975, King of Leather and also owner of a leather store, it said. We settled down and began to enjoy the romance of each other, almost like a warm glow inside of us. This is the way married grown-ups feel all the time. "Edward," I said. "I am so grateful to be here with you. Are you feeling better?" "Yes, Belle. Much better." I smiled to myself and my future vampire self. I was happy, remembering how embarrassed I was for this girl at 8th grade graduation because her dad was much older than all the other dads. Edward and I would never get old. I began to reapply my grapefruit perfume so my blood wouldn't have an unshowered for weeks taste when he bit me. "What's that smell? Is it grapefruit?" Edward asked. I was surprised that he hadn't lost his memory about human food, the way most vampires do. But, at the same time, I wasn't surprised, it really smelled a lot like grapefruit. "Don't you just love being among all these dead people?" I asked, gesturing to the surroundings. "Well, to be honest, I actually think that part is a little weird. I would like nothing better than to leave this cemetery, make sure you get home safely, and then curl up in my bed with a tall glass of diluted ginger ale." How sweet of him, to say something that didn't make sense for a vampire to say. I casually thrust my neck towards him, bathing it in the moonlight. "Is your neck okay?" he asked. "I don't know. Is it? What do you think, Edward?" I massaged it suggestively, suggesting that I had slept on a pile of coals. "Does it hurt?" he asked. I had to think fast. Did he want for it to hurt? Was that some kind of weird vampire thing where they prefer to bite necks that hurt, the way my mother had always told me that the way you know a piece of fruit is ripe is that it looks like it hurts? Why yes, I stammered, silently thanking the forces that be for the improv class I took last summer. It hurts. It hurts terribly. Then something magical happened. Edward poked my neck. Fire rushed through my entire body. I grabbed his finger, intoxicated by its caress, and gasped for air like a fish out of water gasps for less air. He patted my neck a few times. I wondered if he was putting alcohol on it, the way doctors do before giving you shots. How does that feel? He asked. Like, happy. The truth was, it felt completely indescribable. A patch of blackberries, that's how I would describe it. Okay, great, he said, and stopped. That was quick. Oh, you know what? I said, improvising again. It hurts again. Worse. Much, much worse. Say. I have an idea. You could bite me, and then I would never feel pain again. He gave me a look like I was crazy in love, just as the ground began to shake violently. What's happening? Is this part of the transformation process? I asked, a little unnerved. An earthquake? Edward suggested with the coldly calculating reasoning of a vampire. Suddenly the ground split open beneath us, cracking the tombstone in half, and from the grave emerged a figure with blood-stained fangs and a black cape whose tall, curved collar was neatly pressed down in obvious defiance of the current trends. Are you, the Leather King? I managed to ask. No, said the figure. You seriously don't recognize me? I looked at him closely, the pale face, the cape, the red eyes, the ridiculously large fangs. I couldn't place him. Do I know you from work? I strained to remember if he was one of my coworkers. I strained to remember if I had a job. Goodness gravy, Belle, I sit next to you every day in English. I'm sorry, every face at school kind of blends into one conglomerate dull face except for the face of Edward Mullen, the love of my life. He clapped his hands slowly, sinisterly. Well, congratulations to you too, he said. I hope you have a really happy life forever and ever in your sweet little house behind a neatly mowed lawn. What you two have is special, you know that? Really special. We're all very jealous of your overwhelming love for one another. Thank you. To get on with my point, I'm Joshua. A vampire. I don't mean to be rude, but you two are trespassing on my grave property right now. I'm truly sorry about all this, Belle. Honestly, I think you're very attractive, even though you don't wear makeup or pay attention to the fashions. To make a confession, I had every intention of asking you to prom the first week of school. But now I'm going to have to take your lives, unfortunately, to nourish myself. I balked. Another vampire? I guess it made sense, the states of the Pacific Northwest were known for their lenient monster laws. Next to me, Edward screamed and covered his eyes, likely visualizing his triumph over this flamboyantly costumed vampire. I relaxed, comfortably settling into the gravestone, ready to watch what every girl hopes to experience once, a real-life vampire fight. Not so fast, Josh, I said from my seat. Cut him up into little bits and burn them, Edward. What? Why would I do that? Why would I ever do that? He pondered and then gave me a sharp look. No. I am not pondering that, Belle. I am hysterically yelling right now. I am experiencing the greatest fear I have ever felt in my life. Edward was visibly shaking. I think that happens when vegetarian vampires haven't eaten a bear in a while or something. Edward, we don't have time to have another DTR talk right now. There's another vampire now, and I don't think he's familiar with Peter Singer's The Ethics of What We Eat. Another vampire, he looked behind his shoulder. Where's the first? He quavered, most likely from hunger. He gave me another sharp look. No. Stop that. I am not quavering from hunger. That doesn't even make sense. Come on, Edward, I cajoled. He's a vampire, you're a vampire, get to work. Stop, Belle. This is serious, this is not a good time to roleplay. Roleplay? Yeah, roleplay. Like that time we roleplayed that I could lift Tom Newt's car, or when we roleplayed that I could reach speeds of up to 100 mph. Or the one where I had to wear vampire teeth and tell you how much I wanted to drain out all your blood when I first laid eyes on you. He froze. Whoa. Some of this stuff is starting to come together. I turned to Joshua, signaling that we needed some time to work this out. You know what? Joshua said. Even though I am a real vampire, which means by nature I am aloof and hot-tempered, I will give you guys some time. Don't mind me, I'll stand right here, silently seething and flashing my eyes. So all this time you thought I was a vampire? Edward whispered furiously, pulling me a few inches to the left. Sure, I said, you know, the lion falls for the lamb. What? Sorry. It's easier for me if I explain things in animal terms. So you thought I was a lamb? No, a lion. Or, you know, you're the shark and I'm the seal. He stared at me blankly. Okay, I tried again. You're the giraffe and I'm the leaf. Are you breaking up with me? He asked quietly. Of course not, I said tenderly. Only if you're not a vampire. But I'm not a vampire. But, you are kind of a control freak. In a vampire way. You made me boss you around. And while we're being honest, you're my first girlfriend, and before I met you I was doubtful that I had the requisite mouth muscles to speak aloud. I felt my entire monster hierarchy, with Edward vampires at the top. Realigning dramatically. But what about the time that we were talking about different kinds of blood, and you kept talking about how each one has its own unique merits, just like different types of wine you said, and then you went on like a 15-minute rant about blood homogenization, and then you went into that elaborate mnemonic about the various steps to take while drinking blood? You know, the 5 S's, suck, sip, swirl. Swirl again, and then simmer. Yeah, simmer. Wasn't there another one? I think so, I have it written down on some little cards at home. So then how are you not a vampire? I asked, purposefully not inflecting my voice at the end of my question for a lawyer effect. Belle, I'm sorry. I'm not a vampire. I'm only a moderate blood drinker. I like my hamburgers medium rare. Okay, we all set? Asked Josh, tossing another shriveled mole onto a pile. How civilized, I thought, to have a designated place for appetizer refuse, just like a good host providing a bowl to put shrimp tails in. I guess so, I said. Get him, Edward. No, Belle, I can't fight a monster. I will never live up to your abnormal and perverse fantasies. That hurt. Plenty of teenage girls wished their boyfriends were vampires. Durkheim would blame the values of society for this. I pretty much agreed the problem came from some other place external to my brain. I'm getting the hell out of here, Edward said, beginning to back away. If you love me, let's go. But Edward, I called after him. We have to defeat this vampire. Are you just going to leave me alone here with him? Isn't that what you want? Well, that proved it. A real vampire would have been sucking my blood as he said this. I watched as Edward disappeared into the fog, this time not in a magical way but in a loud, falling way, signifying that he had tripped over a gravestone. Josh and I watched as he reappeared, hurtling over the gravestones as he jogged. Each time he fell, he screamed, looked back over his shoulder at us, and clambered up to his pigeon-toed feet. Josh and I sat there, an awkward silence quickly setting in. I took out my little Edward keepsake knapsack. I hated to do this in front of a stranger, but I needed some release. Determinedly, I began to burn the items one by one: my biology lab report, my stuffed Dracula, some firewood I chopped during our hiking trip, the chunk of hair I pulled from that waitress at Buca di Beppo. I felt better after that. I said cheerfully, should we tell ghost stories? I'm not sure you're aware of the peril of your situation, Belle. You see, I am a hungry, immoral vampire, and you are a vulnerable, blood-filled, mortal girl. Nonetheless, I would like to share with you one ghost story. I call this story The Tale of the Long Ago Locket, Josh said in a shaky ghost voice. I had definitely heard that story before. I hummed to keep myself from falling asleep. What's the matter? Asked Josh. Aren't you interested? It's a really scary story. I know it is. I saw it on an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Josh glowered at me. Most sad, he said. It's too bad you know so much about ghost stories. Tell me, do you know what a mortal girl's best means of survival is when a vampire advances? He asked, advancing. I yawned. Yeah, I think I've seen that episode too. He leaned in close. Run. The answer is, run, he said, crouching down into pre-pounce position. Suddenly, I panicked, rolling out of post-pounce position. This was wrong, all wrong. I was supposed to be bitten by Edward and become a vampire myself. I wasn't supposed to be bitten by some strange vampire and die. Everyone knows there is a fine, finicky line between eternal life as vampire v. death as a human. I hope you like dying. Josh spoke calmly and confidently, like the way you might speak to your mashed potatoes. As he took another step towards me, out of the corner of my eye I saw Edward, bruised and battered after finally surpassing all those gravestones, fleeing out of the gate as Joshua leaned in to bite. 9. In the